Throughout Roman history, no murder had been planned so meticulously, no death had appeared so innocent. What took the life of a 14-year-old boy wasn't that magnificent ring on his finger, it was the microscopic substance hidden within it. But why did Nero feel compelled to kill his own stepbrother Britannicus? Tonight, I'm going to tell you one of history's most cold-blooded child murders. A story that shows just how early the pursuit of power can turn deadly, and how a single drop of poison can change the fate of an empire. Picture this. It's 55 AD, the heart of the Roman Empire. In the magnificent palace atop the Palatine Hill, among gold-plated walls and marble columns, a young boy is about to die. But this death isn't natural. This is one of history's most masterfully planned assassinations. You're standing in the shadows of the imperial dining hall, watching as 17-year-old Emperor Nero observes his stepbrother Britannicus with cold, calculating eyes. The tension in the room is suffocating. Everyone knows something terrible is about to happen, but no one dares to speak. To understand Britannicus' story, we must first understand the man who killed him, Nero. The young emperor who rose to power at 17 through his mother Agrippina's boundless ambition. But Nero knew that to secure his position on the throne, he needed to eliminate the one obstacle that shared his blood. Britannicus was the legitimate son of Emperor Claudius. He had received a perfect education, won the people's love, and enjoyed the Senate's support. He was the rightful heir. Nero, on the other hand, was Agrippina's son from a previous marriage. He had only ascended to the throne through his mother's manipulations. The tension between the two youths had simmered in the palace from day one. Britannicus had never accepted Nero as the true emperor. In his eyes, Nero was a usurper who had stolen his father's throne. Meanwhile, Nero watched Britannicus's growing popularity and legitimacy with increasing paranoia, realizing just how fragile his own position truly was. The palace servants whispered in the corridors about the icy exchanges between the stepbrothers. During formal ceremonies, Britannicus would barely acknowledge Nero's authority. When forced to bow, he did so with obvious reluctance, his eyes burning with resentment. Nero, meanwhile, had begun to see threats in every gesture, conspiracies in every conversation. The breaking point came during a Senate meeting where several senators openly praised Britannicus's intelligence and character, comparing him favorably to his late father Claudius. Some even dared to suggest that perhaps the gods had made an error in the succession. These words reached Nero's ears like poison, feeding his growing paranoia and murderous intent. Nero's advisors had made it crystal clear. When Britannicus turns 15, he'll officially be considered an adult and gain the right to address the Senate. When that day comes, he could challenge your throne. This was Nero's final warning. By the emperor's side was a woman named Locusta, Rome's most infamous poisoner. For years, she had served the palace, coming and going unseen like a ghost. Nero gave Locusta a very special task, kill Britannicus, but make his death appear natural. Locusta worked for months, preparing mixtures from various plants and minerals. But there was a problem. Any poison, when mixed with food or drink, would alter the taste. Britannicus had poison tasters. Everything he ate or drank was first tested by them. That's when Locusta devised a more ingenious method. She would hide the poison inside Britannicus's favorite ring. In nano-sized particles, completely invisible. She applied a special chemical treatment to the ring's metal surface. This poison would be absorbed through the skin upon contact, but wouldn't take effect for several hours. The ring was a masterpiece of deadly craftsmanship. From the outside, it appeared to be an ordinary gold signet ring bearing the Roman eagle, a gift from his father Claudius. But Locusta had transformed it into an instrument of death so subtle that even the victim would never suspect it. Britannicus suspected nothing that morning. At 14, he was an ordinary young man with dreams of the future. He dreamed of ruling Rome, of following in his father's footsteps. He woke early and attended his lessons with his tutors, studying rhetoric, philosophy, and military strategy. As midday arrived, he spent time with friends in the palace gardens. They discussed literature, debated political philosophy, and practiced their oratory skills. Britannicus was known for his quick wit and genuine concern for the Roman people, qualities that made him increasingly popular among the palace staff and visiting dignitaries. When evening came and he prepared for dinner, he put on his favorite rings. Among them was that special ring inherited from his father Claudius. The golden craftsmanship, the Roman eagle engraved upon it, the weight on his finger. As Britannicus slipped on that ring, he was also slipping on his death. The irony was devastating. The ring had been Claudius's gift to his son on his 13th birthday, a symbol of their family legacy and Britannicus's future role as emperor. Now that same symbol of imperial power had become the instrument of his destruction. The evening meal was served in the palace's most magnificent hall. Nero, Britannicus, Agrippina, and other palace dignitaries took their seats at the table. The dinner proceeded normally. Britannicus appeared cheerful, conversing with his stepbrother. The dining hall was a vision of imperial splendor. Massive marble columns supported a ceiling painted with scenes of Roman victories. Golden vessels held the finest wines from across the empire. Slaves moved silently between the diners, refilling cups and replacing courses with practiced efficiency. During the meal, Britannicus raised his hand to his forehead. He complained of a slight headache. Nero, with feigned concern, asked, "Brother, are you well?" Britannicus smiled and replied, "I'm just tired." But as minutes passed, his condition worsened. The poison had mixed with his bloodstream and begun reaching his brain. First came blurred vision, then difficulty breathing, followed by muscle spasms. The poison Locusta had crafted was diabolically clever. It mimicked the symptoms of epilepsy, a condition that could strike anyone without warning. This would provide the perfect cover for Britannicus's death. No one would suspect murder when the symptoms appeared so natural. Britannicus suddenly stood up, but lost his balance. He fell to the floor, his body beginning to convulse. Foam emerged from his mouth, his eyes rolled back, and he struggled to breathe, but couldn't. The dinner guests were horrified. Doctors were summoned, but there was nothing they could do. Within minutes, Britannicus's body lost all vital functions. The 14-year-old boy breathed his last on the cold marble floor before his stepbrother's eyes. The scene was one of pure horror. This boy, who just moments before had been laughing and sharing stories with the dinner guests, was now writhing in agony on the floor. His young body, which should have had decades of life ahead of it, was shutting down system by system. Agrippina, despite her political calculations, was genuinely shocked by the sight of her stepson's death. She had orchestrated many political moves, but watching a child die in such agony was beyond even her hardened heart. Her face went pale, and she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Nero's reaction was the most shocking part of the entire event. He showed no surprise, no panic, no grief. It was as if everything was proceeding exactly as expected. In fact, he said, "My brother was already an epileptic. He had these seizures frequently." Of course, this was a lie, but no one dared contradict Nero. The palace physicians, terrified of contradicting the emperor, quickly confirmed Nero's explanation. They pronounced Britannicus's death the result of a severe epileptic seizure, despite never having treated him for such a condition. The official records were altered to support this narrative. Witnesses to the dinner were quietly warned about the dangers of spreading rumors regarding the emperor's family. Several servants who had been present that night mysteriously disappeared over the following weeks. Their fates served as a clear message to anyone who might consider speaking the truth about what they had witnessed. The speed with which the palace machinery moved to cover up the truth was impressive and terrifying. Within hours, a completely fabricated medical history for Britannicus had been created, complete with testimony from palace physicians about his supposed long-standing epileptic condition. Locusta was richly rewarded for this success. Nero granted her a special mansion and a golden salary. She became the empire's unofficial master poisoner, consulted whenever the emperor needed someone to disappear without obvious violence. But years later, when the new Emperor Galba came to power, his first act was to have Locusta executed. The greatest master of the poisoning arts was killed with her own poison, a fitting end to a career built on murder. Locusta's execution revealed the true nature of imperial service. No matter how valuable your skills, no matter how faithfully you served, your life ultimately depended on the whims of whoever held power. She had thought her specialized knowledge made her indispensable, but she learned too late that in the world of imperial politics, no one was safe. Britannicus's death was officially attributed to natural causes. A funeral was held, mourning was declared, but everyone knew the truth. Nero had eliminated his only potential rival. The Senate, cowed by fear, offered no investigation. The people, already terrified of their young emperor, spoke only in whispers. The funeral itself was a masterpiece of political theater. Nero played the grieving brother perfectly, weeping publicly and delivering a eulogy that praised Britannicus's virtues while subtly reinforcing the official story of his death. Those who knew the truth watched this performance with a mixture of horror and admiration for its sheer audacity. But the murder of Britannicus sent shockwaves through Roman society that would reverberate for years. It established Nero as someone willing to kill even family members to maintain power. This reputation would precede him in all future political dealings, making potential rivals think twice before challenging his authority. What drove Nero to murder his own stepbrother? Modern psychological analysis suggests a combination of factors: extreme narcissism, paranoid personality disorder, and the corrupting influence of absolute power from a young age. Nero had been raised by Agrippina to believe he was destined for greatness, but he was also acutely aware that his claim to the throne was weaker than Britannicus's. This created a constant state of insecurity, masked by grandiose behavior. Every display of respect for Britannicus felt like a personal attack on Nero's legitimacy. The methodical nature of the assassination also reveals Nero's calculating side. This wasn't a crime of passion, but a coldly planned execution. He had considered various methods, consulted with experts, and chosen the approach that would be least likely to implicate him. This level of premeditation in someone so young was truly chilling. Britannicus's murder must be understood within the broader context of Roman imperial politics. The Roman Empire was a system where ultimate power was concentrated in one person, creating enormous incentives for violence and treachery. Previous emperors had also eliminated potential rivals, but they typically targeted distant relatives or obvious political threats. Nero's willingness to kill a 14-year-old stepbrother who posed no immediate threat demonstrated a new level of paranoid ruthlessness. The Roman aristocracy's response to the murder was telling. Their silence in the face of such obvious injustice revealed how completely fear had replaced principle in imperial politics. Even senators who had once praised Britannicus now spoke only of Nero's wisdom and justice. The ring itself became a symbol of how power corrupts and destroys. What should have been a precious link between father and son, a symbol of imperial legacy and family love, became an instrument of fratricide. After Britannicus's death, the ring disappeared from historical records. Some say Nero kept it as a trophy, others believe it was melted down to destroy evidence. But the ring's symbolic power lived on in the whispered stories of palace servants and the nightmares of those who witnessed its deadly work. The choice of the ring as a murder weapon was particularly cruel because it forced Britannicus to participate in his own destruction. Every time he admired the craftsmanship, every time he thought of his father's love, he was unknowingly absorbing the poison that would kill him. Britannicus's death marked the beginning of Nero's transformation from a paranoid young emperor into one of history's most notorious tyrants. Having successfully eliminated his most legitimate rival, Nero's confidence in his ability to solve problems through murder grew exponentially. Over the following years, Nero would order the deaths of his mother Agrippina, his wife Octavia, his advisor Seneca, and countless others. But it all began with a 14-year-old boy and a poisoned ring. This first murder established a pattern that would define Nero's reign and ultimately lead to his downfall. The psychological impact of murdering Britannicus may have been profound for Nero himself. While he showed no immediate remorse, some historians suggest that the guilt of fratricide contributed to his later erratic behavior and apparent mental deterioration. Britannicus's story teaches us about the true cost of absolute power. When one person holds unlimited authority over others, the temptation to eliminate rivals through violence becomes overwhelming. The Roman system created these incentives and then acted surprised when emperors became murderers. The story also reveals how easily societies can convince themselves to ignore obvious injustices. The Roman elite knew Britannicus had been murdered, but they chose to accept the official lie rather than risk their own positions. This collective moral cowardice enabled Nero's later atrocities. Modern readers might wonder how such obvious murder could be covered up so easily. The answer lies in understanding how thoroughly fear had penetrated Roman society. When speaking the truth meant death, most people chose silence. We can only speculate about what kind of Emperor Britannicus might have become. Contemporary accounts describe him as intelligent, compassionate, and genuinely concerned about the welfare of Roman citizens. His education had emphasized duty and service rather than personal glorification. Some historians suggest that Britannicus might have been one of Rome's greatest emperors, combining his father Claudius's administrative skills with a younger generation's energy and vision. His death robbed Rome of a potentially transformative leader. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that Britannicus never had the chance to prove himself. He died before he could demonstrate whether he would have been a tyrant or a reformer, a wise ruler or a disappointment. His potential remained forever unrealized. Britannicus's death was the first true indicator of Nero's character. After this murder, he would go on to kill his own mother, burn Rome, and massacre thousands of innocents. But all began with the poisoning of a 14-year-old child. This story shows us that there are no limits to what people will do in pursuit of power. An invisible poison in a ring changed the fate of an empire. Britannicus's death wasn't just the end of one child. It was one of the first steps toward the beginning of the end for Rome itself. And who knows how many other Britannicuses, how many other innocent children, have lost their lives throughout history for the ambitions of the powerful. These stories remind us that power and innocence can never coexist peacefully. The ring may be lost to history, but its lesson remains. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and the innocent always pay the price. In remembering Britannicus, we honor not just his memory, but our obligation to protect the vulnerable from those who would sacrifice anything and anyone for power.